when having a conversation about where you go when you die. Do you go to heaven? Do you go to hell? Well, according to Genesis 3 and Ecclesiastes 12, the body returns to the dust. Sometimes dying is referred to as sleep. Moses was told he would sleep with his fathers. David was told he would sleep with his fathers. Job talks about sleep in chapter 7. Chapter 14, he says sleep in the dust, which kind of sounds like a dirt nap. The Messiah referred to people who had died as being asleep. The writer of the epistles, a lot of people think it's Paul, 1 Corinthians 15, 1 Thessalonians 4, both refer to people who have died as being asleep. The body goes back to the dust, according to a lot of the writings. Then there's the body that was created in Genesis 2, and it says that the Most High breathed in the breath of life. The breath of life. And in Job 33, he says that the breath of the Most High has given him life. In Job 27, he says, while my breath is within me, the spirit of the Most High is in my nostrils. So there you see that connection between the breath and the spirit. A lot of people connect those two things, and it's connected a lot in the writings. In Ecclesiastes 12, Solomon says that the spirit returns to Yahweh when the man dies. Jehovah, the Most High, returns to him when he dies. There are times where you'll see this phrase or this idea of giving up the ghost. It says that Abraham gave up the ghost. Isaac, Ishmael, Jacob, Job, the Messiah, Ananias. Is his name Ananias? Ananias. That's his name. Ananias lied to the apostles and he gave up the ghost. Even Herod, a really wicked guy, gave up the ghost. Now, the association between giving up the ghost and the spirit, in John 19, when you see give up the ghost, they use the same word that's translated as spirit a lot. That's that G4151. But other than that, I haven't seen a lot that connects the idea of giving up the ghost to the spirit. But they do appear to be connected. Isaiah 57 actually refers to the souls Yahweh has made, but it uses that word that's usually referred to the breath. When you look in the Septuagint, that same passage in Isaiah 57 is translated, I have created all breath. So you're back to the breath again. So in Genesis 2, this body that was created by the dust, or created with dust, from the dust, the breath of the Most High, he breathes into this body, and man becomes a living soul. English, soul. In Hebrew, H5315, you'll see that same word when Abraham and Sarah and Lot left the city and they had the souls with them. These are people, slaves actually, but they refer to them as souls. When you look at David, or the writer of the Psalms, my soul, my soul, my soul. He's constantly talking about his soul, his soul, his soul. In the Torah, the word that is translated as soul, usually, is actually translated a few times as the dead. Leviticus 19, 2 times in Leviticus 21, and number 6. So even when a person dies, even when that body goes back to the dust and the breath goes back to the Most High, it's still referred to as the soul. What is referred to as the soul? Not the body, not the breath. Okay? It was helpful for me when I realized that the Greek word for the same thing, which is G5590, in the Blue Letter Bible, they actually spell it P-S-Y-C-H-E. Very helpful. The breath that goes back to Yahweh is not my personality. It's not me. The thing that goes into the ground that rots and turns into dust. But my soul. So, let's talk about the soul. The book of Enoch, for those who subscribe or think the book of Enoch is authoritative, says that there's a collection or a gathering place for souls. And it's divided. The barriers are made of light and water. Okay. Luke 16, the Messiah talks about the rich man who saw Abraham and Lazarus afar off. And when he tried to ask them to give him something, they said, we can't get to you because there's a big division. They called it a gulf. Okay? A gulf is usually something that holds water. Interesting. That kind of matches Enoch 22. Enoch 21 talks about a holding place for non-humans. Now, Enoch 22 is a holding place for souls, the souls of the children of men, to be specific. But Enoch 21 talks about a holding place for, say for instance, disobedient stars. Talks about 7 disobedient stars who are being temporarily held there. All right. And it also is being identified as a permanent holding place for bad angels, fallen angels, disobedient angels. When you look at Matthew 25, the Messiah talks about the everlasting fire for the angels. Okay, if you look at the epistle, 2 Peter, it talks about the angels who sin being cast into hell and chained until judgment. So, again, that kind of goes right along with the book of Enoch, chapter 21 and 22. All right. So one of these holding places for souls is a place for the souls of sinners, according to Enoch 22. He says things like they're bound forever. He says there's pain and suffering. In 2nd Enoch, the writer, is interesting. This is chapter 7 of 2nd Enoch. It talks about a place of darkness where there are prisoners awaiting judgment, perpetual weeping, all hours, and them being unceasingly tortured. Now, the significant thing about 2nd Enoch 7 is he says that he was taken up to a place called the second heaven. Okay? A lot of the references of where souls go, a lot of times it's referred to these souls going down somewhere. But he says up to the second heaven. So that's a little different. In Psalms 9, David talks about the wicked being turned into hell. Psalms 55, let them go down quick into hell. Psalms 143, he talks about dwelling in darkness as those long dead. All of these things sound like what you hear in Enoch 22, 21, or 2nd Enoch 7, for instance. Probably more places than that, but at least those places. When the Messiah talks in Luke 16, he talks about how the rich man lifted up his eyes, being in torments, tormented by the flame, it being a place of torment. So again, that torment, torture, suffering thing is really, really a common theme. And it also says he lifted up his eyes from that place, which sounds like he's down there somewhere. Okay? In Matthew 8, Matthew 8, Matthew 22, Matthew 25, the Messiah talks about it being a place of darkness, suffering, eternal punishment, which all kind of goes along with Enoch 22. Now, also in Enoch 22, it talks about a place for the righteous. He says there's a spring of water there. Water. There it is again. 1 Samuel 28, when Saul went to the witch to speak to Samuel, the witch asked Saul, who should I bring up? That sounds like they're coming from down there somewhere. She said that she saw gods or magistrates ascending up from the earth. Again, that sounds like they're coming up from somewhere. And then when Samuel comes out, he says, why did you bring me up? So wherever Samuel was, he was brought up from that place, which all again lines up with what Enoch or the book of Enoch is saying, the books of Enoch. All right. When David in Psalm 16 says things about leaving his soul in hell, Psalm 49, redeem his soul from the power of the grave, Psalm 86, deliver my soul from the lowest hell, Psalm 139, if I ascend up, you're there. If I make my bed in hell, you're there. Job 14, hide me in the grave. So even Job, not just the writer of Psalms, but even Job has this idea of his soul being in the grave or in hell, or him being in the grave or in hell. And the Messiah said in Luke 16 that the beggar died and was carried by the angels to where Abraham was. So now we have this picture of David being somewhere, Job being somewhere, Abraham being somewhere, and Lazarus being somewhere. Okay? Now, a lot of people believe that the grave is just that plot of dirt that your body's being buried in. And I know people use the word grave to refer to that. However, there's a lot of activity that exists in the writings, and I find that very difficult to believe that that's taking place in a plot of land over there at Inglewood Cemetery. Okay? I'm not saying it's not. I'm just not inclined to believe that. All right? So, in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, the writer of that talks about being out of the body, as if there's such a thing as being out of the body. Me being out of my body. Well, that totally matches the idea of me having a psyche or a soul. In Revelation 1, it says the Messiah has the keys to the grave. So this holding place where people are being held, he has the key to that place. In Revelation 20, it talks about the key to the bottomless pit. Again, a holding place that someone has the power to release you from, or the authority to release you from. Okay? So when you look at 1 Samuel 28, and you look at Samuel talking to Saul, I don't perceive that to be Samuel just a ghost that can just float around and do whatever he wants to do. Instead, Samuel was released to have a conversation with Saul. He was still a prisoner, just like when you go to a prison and you can request to see a prisoner and they bring the prisoner out of the holding tank and they sit them on the other side of that window and you can talk to them. They're still a prisoner, they're still incarcerated, and they're going back to the cell. Okay? Or even when they stand before a judge, if the judge doesn't say you're free, you're still incarcerated, you're still a prisoner, and you're going back to the cell. All right? So, that's a very realistic understanding. I'm not saying it's accurate. I'm not saying this is what it is. I'm saying it matches what's written so far. Matthew 27 talks about dead saints appearing in the holy city. Are we talking about corpses, rotting corpses with worms and then walking around like zombies like Michael Jackson Thriller? My money says no. Instead, those were the psyches. They're souls. That's how you can identify that they were dead saints. This their soul, their identity. Okay? In Mark 9, the Messiah is talking to Moses. Talking to Moses. Moses was dead for a long time. He's not sitting there talking to a zombie or a corpse with worms coming out of his eye. He's talking to his soul. That's what makes Moses Moses. In John 11, the Messiah talked to Lazarus. Lazarus is in a tomb, quite possibly with a bunch of other dead guys. But when the Messiah says, Lazarus, come forth, he has authority. But only Lazarus is permitted to come forth. Only Lazarus is permitted to come from wherever his soul was and get back in that body. So let's talk about people that die and go to heaven. I've heard it all my life. Die and go to heaven, die and go to heaven, die and go to heaven. The only people that I'm aware of that I can read about that went to heaven was, well, Enoch. If you believe 2nd Enoch chapter 1, he talks about how he was taken to heaven. Elijah, 2nd Kings, says that the chariot of fire took him into heaven. The Messiah ascended into heaven in Luke chapter 24. On a side note, there's a Greek word that I don't remember right now, but the Greek word is a word that refers to something unique. For instance, if I say, give me a second, I'm going to go upstairs right quick and get that for you, that Greek word applies. Or if I say the roof is leaking, I'm going to climb up the ladder and get it and fix it, that word applies. Or if I'm going to go on some kind of adventure and I'm going to climb Mount Everest, that word applies. However, if you knock me over the head and I'm unconscious and you throw me over your shoulder and take me up the stairs, that word does not apply to what's happening to me. That's interesting because the Messiah says that no man does that word into heaven other than the Son who came down from heaven. So that's an interesting side note. Revelation 12 also says that the dragon was thrown down and his angels were thrown down. So originally, they weren't in this holding place. This is where they ended up. Because originally, they were somewhere where they could be thrown down from, according to the writings, if my understanding is accurate. So, going to heaven, I can't find the writings that talk about people dying and going to heaven. Okay? However, there's this word paradise, G3587. Now, in Enoch 22, one of the holding places for souls, he identifies as a place for the righteous. There's a spring of water there. There's the water again. Second Enoch, chapter 8, he calls it the third heaven, and he says the Lord rests there. And it's a paradise between physical and spiritual, and the tree of life is there, and there's fruit growing there. Now, everywhere else it says you go down. The writer of Second Enoch says, I went up to this place. So that's different. That's different. Now in Genesis 2, Yahweh planted the paradise in Eden. And just like the Enoch account, the tree of life was there. There was fruit growing. There was a river with water. And man was actually placed there to work and guard this place. But in Genesis 3, man was kicked out. In Ezekiel 28, it says that the anointed cherub sinned and was kicked out. Okay. Now, let's talk more about paradise, this place where the righteous go. Righteous souls are kept. In 1 Samuel 28, when Samuel was brought up, he said, why did you disquiet me? Which means wherever he was quieted. It wasn't torment, suffering, and yelling and screaming and being tormented, weeping and gnashing of teeth. It was a quiet experience for him. In Luke 16, the Messiah talks about how Lazarus was comforted. So now you got Samuel, who was disquieted when they bothered him. And then you got Lazarus, who was comforted. And you got the rich man in a place that's unreachable, that's on the other side of the gulf or the other side of the water, asking Lazarus for water, which means the rich man, for some reason, thought Lazarus could get him some water. So there's the water again. Enoch says there's water there. According to the Messiah, the rich man thought there was water there. And when he asked Abraham didn't say, man, we ain't got no water. He said, we can't get to you. All right. So on the cross, Luke 23, the Messiah tells this other guy who's about to die, you're going to be with me in paradise. You're going to be with me in paradise. Now, according to that writer, 2nd Enoch, the Lord is in this place called paradise in the third heaven. Okay. According to David, if he ascended up to the heavens, the Most High is there. And if he made his bed in hell, the holding place for his soul, he's there as well. Okay. So the Messiah tells this thief, you're going to be with me in paradise. In 2 Corinthians 5, the writer talks about being absent from the body. Now, this is the same guy that was writing about being out of the body. Now he's talking about being absent from the body. But this time he includes the idea of being present with the Messiah. Absent from the body's in the dirt. It's rotting away. The spirit has gone back to the Most High. Yet the idea of being with the Messiah, or with the Most High, or with the Lord, it fits. It doesn't clash. I'm not saying it's correct. I'm just addressing what was written and seeing what works and what don't work, at least to the best of my ability. In that same Second Corinthians 12, the writer actually brags about knowing someone who was caught up to the third heaven, the paradise. He literally says third heaven, paradise. So whoever wrote 2 Corinthians 12, they obviously, well, I'm not going to say obviously. I'll say whoever wrote 2nd Enoch and whoever wrote 2 Corinthians, they both seem to be on the same frequency regarding this third heaven paradise idea. Okay. In Revelation 6, you have an account of slain souls. These are people who have been killed, and they are given rest as they wait for the remaining souls to be killed. So everybody who's going to be killed wrongfully hasn't been killed yet, and they're being given rest. So they're dead, but they're being given rest, because if you read some more, they're crying out about justice for them being murdered. So they're given rest. Lazarus is comforted. Samuel quieted. Paradise. It doesn't clash. It actually fits. In Revelation 22, it talks about a place where there's the river, the water, the tree of life, the fruit, and the Lamb is there. The Lamb is the Lord, the Messiah. So the same idea that was presented way back in Enoch, and the idea of a very similar description of what was placed in Eden, is also mentioned in Revelation 22. Okay. Another thing about this place with regards to where these souls are, the holding place for the souls, the gathering place, is that there are petitions going on. Petitions of the souls, the dead people with requests. In Enoch 22, he says that the soul of Abel is crying out regarding what happened with him and Cain. And that fits Genesis, because Genesis told Cain, man, the voice of the blood of your brother is coming up through the dirt. Wow, it kind of fits. In Enoch 22, he names a place for petition for those slain in the day of sinners. So there's that petition idea. In Luke 16, this rich man, he's asking for water. He's asking to send somebody to warn his brother. He's making petitions. He can't get over there, but he's putting requests over there. He's sending over requests. All right. In Enoch, in 2nd Enoch, when he talks about the place where people are suffering, this is 2nd Enoch chapter 7. He says that the prisoners there asked him to pray for them. Wow, that's a petition of people who have died. So you got the rich guy and these prisoners, they're making petitions. You got Abel and the people who are wrongfully slaughtered making petitions. So there appears to be a consensus that the place where souls go, whether they're righteous souls or not, there's a petition option going on. Okay. Lastly, I'll just address a few end time things with regards to what we're talking about. Enoch 22, these souls are being held there until judgment. That's what Enoch 22 says. Job 14 talks about him being dead or hidden in the grave until a set time, where the Most High will remember him and appoint a time for him to be changed. Okay, that sounds very familiar. Matthew 24, the Messiah talks about a trumpet being sounded and the elect being gathered together in the sky. This is the time where I see the idea of folks who die going to heaven or going up somewhere. Okay, but this might be the last trump, the 7th one. So this ain't, grandma died at General Hospital and she went on up to heaven. That's not really what this is saying. John 11, Martha tells the Messiah that she believes that in the resurrection, there will be a resurrection on the last day. So again, the idea of souls rising up she's definitely someone who believes in that. 1 Corinthians 15 talks about the resurrection of the dead, and this is going to happen at the last trump. The dead will be raised. And it talks about being changed, which sounds just like what Job was talking about. 1 Thessalonians 4. The living will not rise up before the dead. So you got this writer talking about how those who belong to him will meet him in the air. But it will be the folks who died first. And then the folks who are alive. Okay? In Revelation 20, it talks about the souls of the righteous who were killed, being resurrected, and living with the Messiah for 1,000 years. This resurrection is being identified by that writer as the first resurrection. Okay? After that 1,000 years, the writer says that the holding place is going to be brought up, and those who are in the holding place are going to be judged. And if their name is not found in the book of life, the holding tank will be thrown into the lake of fire along with them. Okay? So, this is what the writings say. I'm hoping that addressing these things, first of all, I'm hoping that everything I said, if not everything, like 99% of what I said, is not me freestyling it, just kind of, pulling it out of the sky, but instead, everything that I'm talking about, you can dig it up and read it yourself. I did not write this. I didn't co-write this. This was stuff that was already written, and it's been there for a long time. And I'm not saying it's accurate. I'm saying that's what I'm aware has been written. Okay? So, next time someone wants to approach you and say, do you know where you're going to go when you die? Do you want to die and go to heaven? Do you want to die and go to hell? It's possible that they may be able to offer you even more of an understanding than what you already have. It's possible that they just might not really know what they're talking about. But the only way that you're going to be in the best position to determine which one of those it is to be aware of the conversation. What has already been written? What was already perceived? These folks are writing things, and you can tell that what they perceive to be the case is bleeding through what they're saying. So are they mistaken, or are they not mistaken? I think that's about it. Yeah, that's it.